Welcome back to Who Needs a Superhero. We are in Chapter 8, Spider-Man! Saved for Service. This is Part 4 and the conclusion to Chapter 8. Title of this one is Doing What Needs to Be Done, Regardless. In what's perhaps my favorite comic book story, Spider-Man trails Doc Octopus, who has stolen a radioactive medication called ISO-36. That serum is the only hope to save the life of Spider-Man's hospitalized Aunt May. Spider-Man tracks Dr. Octopus to his lair on the floor of the sea. During the brutal slugfest underwater, the hideout partially collapses. The villain makes good his escape, but Spider-Man is pinned beneath tons of debris. Amazing Spider-Man number 32, issue 32, ended on one of the greatest cliffhangers in comic book history. 20 feet out of reach is a radioactive serum on which Aunt May's life depends. Water pours into the damaged building. Spider-Man struggles vainly against the massive weight bearing down on him. After days of relentless effort, the young man is exhausted. He can't budge the debris. The waters rising, the level will soon submerge and trap the hero. All seems lost. Spider-Man and Aunt May are apparently doomed. Waiting for the next issue was the longest 4 weeks of my life. When the Amazing Spider-Man number 33 finally arrived, I couldn't wait to get it home. Instead, I sat down on the sidewalk in front of the drugstore and read it on the spot. As the story opens, Spider-Man strives again and again against the weight of the wreckage, but to no avail. He drifts in and out of consciousness, seeing visions of Aunt May in her hospital bed. The water rises. Spider-Man gathers his strength for one final effort. The debris shifts infinitesimally. The hero heaves again, and the weight moves another fraction of an inch. Within my body is the strength of many men. Spider-Man declares, and now I've got to call on all that strength, all that power that I possess. I must prove equal to the task. I must be worthy of that strength, or else I don't deserve it. As the scene unfolds, the panel grows larger and larger. On the verge of blacking out, Spider-Man expends his last iota of strength. To my dying day, I will remember the full-page drawing of the triumphant Spider-Man rising to his feet and pressing tons of metal on the outstretched arms. What happened? At the end of one issue, he couldn't lift the weight, and then in the next he could. Isn't that cheating? No. Spider-Man made up his mind to use his abilities to their fullest. In the moment of trial, Peter Parker discovered his gifts were enough to do what needed to be done. You've probably had the same experience a bit under less dramatic circumstances. As a young pastor, I was terrified that I might say or do the wrong thing in a crisis situation. I pumped one of my experienced colleagues for the right scriptures to read after a stillbirth and the best prayer to offer after a suicide, and the most comforting words to use while waiting for the outcome of a risky surgery. After an hour of interrogation, my friend cut off my remaining questions. He said, "Listen," he told me, "serving God means showing up and making yourself available for God's use. You won't always have the right words or the perfect prayer. That's okay. The people you're helping will later forget what passage you recited or what you said in the prayer, but they will always remember that you were there if you'll just show up. God will find a way to use you and your gifts. I've taken that advice to heart. I've never felt adequate to the task when I have to help a family through a suicide or accidental death, but I show up and God finds a way to use me. When we offer ourselves in God's service, God doesn't guarantee us success in every venture, but He will provide significant strength to do whatever we are truly called to do. Whether our gifts are great or small, in God's gracious hands, those gifts will be enough. We often have trouble believing that our gifts are sufficient for God's purposes. Maybe you wish you had different gifts to you. Maybe you wish you had different gifts to use. I can confess a secret envy. I've always been good with words, but that wasn't the gift I wanted. I longed to be an artist. I yearned to draw. I imagined my work gracing book covers and hanging in galleries. In fact, I can't draw a crooked line without making a mess. Spider-Man probably wishes he could fly instead of having to swing around New York skyline on the synthetic cobwebs. Maybe he'd love to swap his wall-crawling power for X-ray vision. No matter, we don't get to choose our gifts and talents. We can improve and hone our gifts, or we can minimize and neglect them. But that's as far as our choices reach. Sometimes God's plan is different than ours. When that happens, our best course is to use the gifts we have, trusting God will make them count. For if in the eagerness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what one has, not according to what one does not have. 2 Corinthians 8 verse 12. Do you remember the FedEx commercial spoofing the popular movie Castaway that aired during the 2003 Super Bowl? A delivery man knocks on the door of a suburban house. When the woman answers, the man proudly hands over the package. He tells the woman he's been stranded on a deserted island for years. Though through many hardships and provisions, he held on to this package, planning for the day he could deliver it in person. The woman accepts the package with thanks, but before the door closes, the former castaway asks the woman what's in the package. The woman assures him it's nothing particularly important, just a few odds and ends: a satellite telephone, a global positioning device, a compass, a water purifier, and some seeds. When we Christians don't exercise our gifts, we're just like the castaways who refuse to unwrap what God has placed within His reach. We hobble through life, struggle with circumstances, and cripple ourselves because we don't take hold of the gifts God intends for us. When we neglect our gifts, we reject the very resources and all-wise God has provided for an abundant living. Overlooking our gifts impoverish us and makes life harder than it needs to be. On the other hand, nothing else is so fulfilling as faithfully exercising our gifts to God's glory. This path leads to our greatest contentment and joy. We do our children such a disservice when we encourage the belief that making money is the chief and end of life. Certainly we need to provide for the necessities, but our lives mean more and accomplish more when serving God is our first priority. Not that our gifts will necessarily yield wealth and success, especially in the early years of Spider-Man's character. The more Spider-Man serves the world with his powers, the more frequently he's branded a menace and an outlaw. He's often short on money. His Spider-Man identity is also complicated as family life and friendship. Of course, these frustrations anger the young man, yet Peter Parker doesn't mothball his costume. He can't turn his back on his gifts, in spite of personal sacrifices and the world's ingratitude. Once Parker tastes the thrill of being Spider-Man, 9-to-5 existence seems bland and blah. Banal. It's the same for us. The world may reward us with money when we deny our gifts for the sake of fitting the expectation of others, but using our gifts thankfully and faithfully yields what money can't provide: peace with God and peace with ourselves. I met a woman as a Christian Writers Conference who used to work for a prestigious advertising agency in New York. Her income was 6 figures and her future looked dazzling. She told me, "I took a long time to discover I wasn't happy in the ad business. I was using my best talents to sell mouthwash and underwear. I was going to waste. Although I hadn't been in church for years, I went to a Christian retreat to think about my values and priorities. I guess God got a hold of me there. I never went back to the agency." Today, she uses her gifts in the service of Christ, supporting causes she believes in. She writes for several Christian ministries, a newsletter, a humor column, occasionally articles and brochures. "I'm not making much money," she says, smiling brightly, "but I'm making a great life." When we devote ourselves to serving God with our talents and abilities, we unknowingly become role models. When others see us using our gifts, they're often inspired and encouraged to use their own. In the DC universe, Superman is the ultimate role model and inspiration for generations of heroes. In one story, Wonder Woman phones Superman and his Clark Kent identity to thank him for the advice he had recently shared with her. Clark Kent deflects the compliment with a chuckle and offers to pay for dinner the next time the two heroes get together. Wonder Woman smiles and thinks to herself, "Clark has no idea what an inspiration he is to me and others." That's how heroes affect us, even from the comic page into real life, like mine, for example. After being a Superman fan for years, I briefly corresponded in 1987 with Superman's creator, the late Jerry Siegel. I decided I should tell this man how much I enjoyed his work over the years. Siegel replied in a series of letters, always warm and humble. "I regret that years ago I missed seeing you when you were very young, with that towel tied around your neck, standing in a dramatic crouch, fists clenched, poised and eager to leap up and away to rescue the suffering humanity." Siegel wrote in one letter, he added, "I am glad that Superman's mission to help those in need inspired you to do likewise." Should I be embarrassed that a comic book character is one of my role models? I'm not, whether on the printed page or in my neighborhood. I am constantly inspired by those who use their gifts gladly and thankfully to build a better world. Ordinary people abound with heroism. I can make a long list of quiet, overlooked people who have inspired me by their faithfulness. Most of the people would be shocked that I find anything heroic in their lives. True heroism rarely involves front page rescues or superhuman achievements. A hero is anyone who uses his or her gifts to do what needs to be done in the service of God's world. We have gifts. We have a calling. Jesus has saved us from sin and for service. God has gifted us not only for our own sake, but also for the benefit of a needy world. We have work to do, and by God's grace, we have the means to do it. Or, to paraphrase a certain web-spinning wall crawler, with great blessing comes great responsibility. And that is the end of chapter 8. next is Chapter 9, Daredevil, Discernment. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification button, share, and of course, comment. We always want your comments. And have a great and wonderful day. Bye for now. God bless.